The Evil Spirit Begs You is a very good story shared by a friend to the channel. The story you tell is as follows. My hometown is in a peaceful countryside. Vietnam is still very poor, houses are sparse. When I heard this story, it was about 27 to 28 years ago. Back then the trees were dense, each family had a garden. Immense space with all kinds of fruit trees around. The house is nestled in the middle of a garden with tiny winding alleys far away. My uncle's house next to my house is famous for being next door, but the alley is far away. His family has 2 husband and wife and 5 children. He works as a snake catcher, hired grave digger, and looks for frogs at night. With those jobs, things are scary. There isn't any. Almost every night he goes to look for frogs all night and only comes back in the morning. When he goes to visit ghosts, he often takes sticky rice or meat that people burn outside the grave so that in the morning they can pick up the grave for the dead and bring it back for the children to eat. Is normal. Then there was a day like every other day, when he came home when it was almost dawn and saw his wife and newborn baby still awake and the baby crying very pitifully. He put his tools in with his wife and asked, "Why is the baby crying so much today?" When he asked, he didn't pay attention to his wife's expression at that time, but when he looked back, he saw that she was sweating. Her face was blank and pale, as if there was something that scared her, so he asked, "What's wrong, Mom?" It. When he asked a few questions, his wife answered hesitantly, "I just saw a very tall man with a harsh voice, coming to ask for T's son." T is the name of the newborn baby. He was very surprised but then calmly asked again, "Did he come all the way here to ask?" Asked that, but he also thought, maybe seeing that our family is poor and has many children, I want to ask for one to take care of, but why not during the day but at night like this? At this time, my wife had also calmed down, so speak. No, he stood outside the window and looked very tall, but I couldn't see his face clearly because it was dark. I asked him next, how specific was he? Wife said. He spoke with a weak accent and couldn't hear clearly, but he basically said, "Please let me take care of this boy." I heard the voice and my whole body was cold, so I was afraid that before I could answer, T started crying. I quickly picked him up and answered, "I won't give it to you, how can it be my child?" After speaking, he looked up and saw that the man was no longer there. He was still very scared and confused when his father came home. After listening, my uncle didn't ask any more questions and advised his wife to calm down because there was probably someone without children coming to ask. From that day on, every night when he returned from looking for frogs, he would see his wife's appearance again like that day, and the same person came to ask for her child as always. Too many times like that made my uncle very angry and decided to stay home tonight to see who was so bold and kept disturbing other people's families. As planned, my uncle didn't go look for frogs that night, but he still pretended to go and hid in the bushes under the house for a very long time. Because the other person didn't come until nearly morning, he fell asleep in the hiding place. Until the baby cried. My uncle woke up startled and looked back at his wife's window, and the little boy was sleeping and there was a shadow of a person wearing a white outfit like that of an old French soldier standing near the window looking at him. Very tall, staring at the bedroom. My uncle quickly grabbed the prepared knife and ran very fast, but because it was dark, he was so nervous that my uncle tripped and fell to the ground, but strangely enough when he crawled, I got up and was about to run, but I didn't see anyone standing there anymore. The boy stopped crying. From that moment on, my uncle began to suspect that something unusual and bad was happening to his family. Even though he was not afraid of ghosts, he also admitted that in this life he had encountered there are many incomprehensible things that can only be thought of as the devil. Many times I watched my uncle know that he was not a normal person. Every day he appeared in the corner of the garden near the beginning of the alley, followed the alley to where his aunt slept. Every day he only had one sentence: there and out, disappearing without a trace right where it first appeared. So my uncle did something that he thought might scare him. That night, my uncle put a knife on his side and went out to the alley. He climbed a very dense jackfruit tree and sat outside to wait, because he knew that he would pass by that place every day. Maybe he knew he would see him. But if you sit still and don't make a sound, that shadow won't pay any attention to you. A whole night of sitting tensely waiting for something to come, that figure appeared again as expected. It walked gently along the old path into the house. Its gait seemed to be gliding on the ground. The figure was tall with clothes on. Under the darkness there seems to be a dim light. Under the quiet and gloomy darkness, there was something unidentified moving closer and closer to him, making him really scared, sweat pouring out like a bath. His arms were strong, dark, full of calluses. He began to tremble without his control. His body felt cold and tingly all over, and he began to regret deciding to do this. But now he had no other choice but had to follow him. He told himself that and tried to calm down so as not to make any noise. The shadow approached the place where he was sitting on the tree. With all his strength and courage, he held the knife and threw it from the tree straight into the place where he thought the other person was not going. Bang! He fell straight down and the knife stuck into the ground. He didn't see anything, just a silent space, a cold breath, and two cold eyes staring at him. In fact, he was too afraid of that moment and waved the knife around wildly as if afraid of someone coming near him. A distant, savage laugh with a half-Western voice, and cold eyes staring at him saying, "I will take your child and your whole family, that's all." It's back to an eerie silence. At this time, he felt his legs were so numb that he could barely walk, because he jumped from too high and fell too hard. He took the knife and went into the house where his wife and baby were sleeping. Only you know everything. Then my uncle also had to ask the shamans to find out what was going on in his family. If this matter was not resolved, T's wife and son would not be able to rest in peace. There was a teacher who watched and said, "There is an evil spirit, not Vietnamese, but a French spirit, haunting my house. It wants to ask me for a child to raise, and now it is hiding." Very angry, if not quickly, the whole family could be in danger. That night, he lay down and thought about why he had been here for so long and was only now being destroyed, or what day and time T was born, which suited him as the teacher said, making him like him so much that he wanted to be his son. And now you've made him angry. The problem now must be found to the source to solve it, but how? I thought for a long time and thought that this ghost of France, or America, I'm not sure, means it's been dead for a long time. If it often appears in one place and also disappears there, there may be something in that corner of the garden. The next morning, he went out there and looked carefully. It was just a vacant lot with a few wild plants growing. He went into the house to get a shovel and started digging there, so after a while his guess was right. Dry bones began to appear and finally a white skull appeared. All questions have been explained. Then he went to buy a box, called a shaman and his family members, including me. When I was young, I was just curious, but I said I witnessed it above, to come pick up the bones and put them in box, asked the teacher to free the ghost and take it to the cemetery. Since then, he said that the devil came back once, but not to ask for you, but to thank you and never see you again. He said it was a true story. My grandmother said the same thing. I only witnessed the last part, so I don't know how true it is. I just told everyone that's it. And this is the end of the story. Everyone who listens to the story finds it interesting. Please give me 1 like and 1 subscriber. I hope everyone has fun listening to the story. See you in the next videos. Goodbye.